The sound that changed Nathan Cole's life was not a bark. It was not a growl or a cry for attention. It was a whimper, soft, broken, almost silent, the sound of a creature that had forgotten how to hope. He knelt in the mud beside a drainage pipe on that gray October morning, his breath catching as two amber eyes stared back at him from the darkness. Those eyes held no fear of him. They held something worse, fear of hope itself. When the dog crawled into the light, Nathan's stomach turned. Thousands of ticks covered its body like a living nightmare. The German shepherd's once proud coat hung in matted clumps. Old scars marked its thin frame. Yet the dog came toward him anyway. Some sounds break your heart, but some sounds break it open. Nathan did not know it yet, but this dog had been waiting for him. Before we continue, please leave a like and let me know which city you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the story. The suburbs of Denver stretched quiet and unhurried in early October, a patchwork of older homes with wraparound porches and newer developments pushing toward the foothills. Nathan Cole lived on Maple Ridge Lane, a street where mature oak trees arched over cracked sidewalks and neighbors still waved from their driveways. He had bought his Craftsman house 3 years ago, a fixer-upper that most buyers had passed over, and restored it board by board with his own hands. At 30 years old, Nathan worked as an architect at a mid-sized firm downtown, designing affordable housing for families who needed second chances. His colleagues called him talented but distant. His friends, the few he kept, called him kind but guarded. He lived alone, ran every morning at 6, and kept his routines like armor against a world that felt unpredictable. Architecture suited him. Buildings were problems you could solve. People were harder. What no one knew, what Nathan had never told a single soul, was that he carried a weight from 5 years past, a moment on a roadside, a choice he made, a guilt that never left. Grace Sullivan entered his life 8 months before that October morning. She was 28, a veterinary technician at Riverside Animal Clinic, with steady hands and a heart that broke easily for creatures in pain. She had her own wound, a patient she could not save 2 years ago, a golden retriever named Biscuit whose owners had waited too long to bring him in. Grace still kept Biscuit's collar in her desk drawer. Her philosophy was simple: every creature deserves someone who fights for them. At the end of Maple Ridge Lane stood a house that made neighbors cross the street. The paint peeled, the yard grew wild, and sometimes, late at night, residents heard a dog barking sharp, desperate sounds that faded into silence. The house belonged to Victor Marsh, a man in his mid-40s whom no one really knew. People whispered, people suspected, but no one acted, except Eleanor Patterson. At 78 years old, Eleanor had lived on Maple Ridge Lane longer than anyone. She remembered when Victor's house was a happy home. She remembered Victor as a boy, and she carried secrets about that family that she had kept for decades, waiting for the right moment and the right person to hear them. That October morning, as Nathan knelt in the mud and looked into two amber eyes, all of these lives began to converge toward a reckoning none of them expected. Saturday morning arrived with the quiet stillness that Nathan had come to cherish. At 6 o'clock, he laced his running shoes and stepped onto his front porch, breathing in the cool October air. Dew clung to the grass. A few houses down, a porch light flickered off as an early riser started their day. The neighborhood was waking slowly, peacefully, unaware that everything was about to change. Nathan followed his usual route down Maple Ridge Lane, past the Hendersons' white picket fence, around the corner toward the creek that wound through the older part of the subdivision. He had run this path hundreds of times. Every crack in the sidewalk was familiar, every overgrown hedge, every leaning mailbox, every barking dog behind a fence. He knew them all. Near the creek, an old drainage pipe jutted from the embankment, half hidden by wild grass and fallen leaves. Nathan had passed it countless times without a second glance. It was nothing, just a concrete tube where rainwater flowed after storms, home to nothing more interesting than the occasional raccoon or stray cat. But this morning, he heard something. He slowed his pace, then stopped entirely. The sound came again, faint, almost lost beneath the rustle of leaves in the breeze. A whimper, weak, broken. The kind of sound that did not ask for help because it had stopped believing help would come. Nathan's first instinct was to keep running. It was probably an animal that would scurry away if he approached. He was already behind schedule. He had work to review before Monday. A dozen reasonable excuses lined up in his mind, but his feet carried him toward the pipe anyway. He crouched at the opening, peering into the darkness. The smell hit him first, something sour and wrong, the unmistakable scent of infection and neglect. He squinted, waiting for his eyes to adjust. Then he saw them, two amber eyes glowing faintly in the dim light, staring back at him. The eyes did not blink, they did not look away. They held his gaze with an intensity that made Nathan's chest tighten. There was no aggression in those eyes, no hope either, just a profound, exhausted resignation, the look of a creature that had suffered so long, it had forgotten any other way to exist. Nathan spoke softly. "Hey there. It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The words felt ridiculous even as he said them. How many times had this animal heard gentle words followed by cruelty? How many promises had been broken? But something shifted in the darkness. The dog moved slowly, painfully dragging itself toward the pipe's opening. Each movement seemed to cost enormous effort. Nathan held his breath, afraid that any sudden motion would send the creature retreating back into the shadows. When the dog finally emerged into the gray morning light, Nathan's stomach turned. It was a German shepherd, or what remained of one. The breed's characteristic nobility was buried beneath matted fur, caked mud, and something far worse. Ticks covered the dog's body, not dozens, not hundreds, but thousands. They clustered on the ears, around the eyes, along the neck, burrowing into every fold of skin. The dog's frame was skeletal beneath the ruined coat. Old scars, pale and smooth, marked its shoulders and back like a map of past suffering. Nathan did not look away. He could not. The dog stopped at the edge of the pipe, swaying slightly, and looked up at him. In that moment, something passed between them, an understanding that transcended species, that needed no words. This dog was choosing to trust him. Despite everything it had endured, despite every reason to fear human hands, it was choosing to come to him. In 30 years of life, Nathan had never felt so chosen, so trusted, by any living thing. Then recognition struck him like a physical blow. He knew this dog. Not personally, he had never touched it, never been close to it, but he had seen it before, through the gaps in a rotting fence at the end of Maple Ridge Lane. Victor Marsh's fence. Nathan remembered glimpses of a German shepherd pacing in a small, filthy enclosure. He remembered the neighborhood whispers about neglect, about sounds late at night, about a man who should never have been allowed to own an animal. This was Victor's dog. The one that had gone missing a week ago. Nathan had seen the half-hearted flyers stapled to telephone poles, the paper already curling at the edges as if even the notices did not expect to find what they sought. A week. This dog had been hiding in a drainage pipe for a week, slowly dying, while its legal owner made a show of searching. The moral question rose in Nathan's mind. Should he call Victor, return the dog to its registered owner? He looked at the thousands of ticks. He looked at the scars. He looked into those amber eyes that held no hope. No. Not this time. Not ever. Nathan stripped off his running jacket and knelt in the mud, moving slowly, telegraphing every motion. He draped the jacket over the dog's trembling body. The dog flinched at the touch but did not pull away. "I've got you," Nathan whispered. "I've got you now." He pulled out his phone and called Grace. His hands were shaking so badly he nearly dropped it. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm with sleep. "Nathan, it's early. Everything okay? I need you." The words came out rough, urgent. "I found a dog. Grace, it's bad. It's really bad." Her tone shifted instantly, the sleepiness gone, replaced by calm professionalism. "Where are you?" "The drainage pipe by the creek. Off Maple Ridge." "Don't try to remove any ticks. Keep him calm and warm. I'm on my way." She hung up before he could respond. That was Grace. No wasted words when action was needed. Nathan sat in the mud beside the dog, one hand resting gently on the jacket. The dog's breathing was shallow but steady. Occasionally, its eyes would drift closed, then snap open again, as if afraid to sleep, afraid that this moment of kindness might vanish like so many others. "She's coming," Nathan told the dog. "Help is coming, you just have to hold on a little longer." 15 minutes later, Grace's truck pulled up on the road above the embankment. She scrambled down the slope with a medical bag over her shoulder, her red hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail. When she reached them and saw the dog, her professional mask cracked for just a moment. Her breath caught. Her eyes widened. Then she was all business again. "Let's get him into the truck. Carefully, support his hindquarters." Together, they lifted the dog so light, far too light for his size, and carried him up the embankment. Grace had already laid out blankets in the back of her truck. They settled the dog onto the soft surface, and Grace immediately began a preliminary assessment, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. Nathan stood back, watching, his ruined jacket forgotten in the mud below. His heart pounded. His hands still trembled. Grace looked up at him. "You did good, Nathan. You might have just saved his life." Nathan nodded, unable to speak. As they drove away, he looked back at the drainage pipe, that dark hole where a forgotten creature had waited to die. Whatever happened next, there was no going back. Riverside Animal Clinic occupied a modest brick building on the edge of downtown, sandwiched between a hardware store and a bakery that filled the morning air with the smell of fresh bread. Grace had worked there for 6 years, rising from assistant to lead technician through dedication and an unwavering commitment to her patients. The clinic's walls were covered with photographs, dogs and cats and the occasional rabbit, all animals that had passed through Grace's care and gone on to happy lives. She called it her wall of hope. They arrived at 8 o'clock. The clinic was not officially open on Saturdays, but Grace had keys and the authority to handle emergencies. She unlocked the back entrance and helped Nathan carry the dog inside, settling him onto an examination table beneath the bright overhead lights. Under the harsh fluorescent glow, the dog's condition looked even worse than it had in the gray morning light. Grace pulled on gloves and began her assessment, her voice slipping into the calm, clinical tone she used when emotions threatened to overwhelm her. Nathan stood nearby, feeling useless, watching her hands move with practiced precision. "Severe tick infestation," Grace said, almost to herself. "I'm estimating over 2,000, maybe more. They're clustered heaviest around the ears and neck, but they're everywhere." She gently lifted one of the dog's paws. "Dehydration, significant malnutrition. He's at least 20 pounds underweight for his frame." She continued her examination, parting the matted fur to check the skin beneath. Her expression tightened. "There are old scars here, on the shoulders, the back, the hindquarters." She did not describe them in detail. She did not need to. The implication was clear enough. These aren't from accidents or fights with other animals. The pattern is wrong for that. Nathan's jaw clenched. "What are you saying?" Grace looked up at him, her green eyes filled with a sorrow that had not dulled despite years of seeing animals in distress. "I'm saying this dog has been through hell, Nathan. But here's the remarkable thing: no broken bones, no fresh wounds, no signs of recent acute trauma." She shook her head slowly. "This dog survived on will alone. He should have given up a long time ago, but he didn't." The tick removal process began shortly after. Grace explained that they could not simply pull the ticks off carelessly. Each one had to be removed properly to prevent infection or leaving mouthparts embedded in the skin. It would take hours. "I need your help," she told Nathan. "Just hold his paw. Let him know he's not alone." Nathan took his position beside the table, his hand resting gently on the dog's front leg. The dog trembled beneath his touch, a constant, low vibration of fear and exhaustion, but he did not pull away. He did not fight. He lay still on the table, amber eyes half closed, submitting to the process with a resignation that broke Nathan's heart. Grace worked methodically, removing tick after tick with steady hands and infinite patience. She dropped each one into a container of alcohol, where they curled and died. The container filled slowly, then quickly, then overflowed into a second container. The scope of the infestation was staggering. Hours passed. Morning became afternoon. Nathan's back ached from standing in the same position. His hand cramped from maintaining the same gentle pressure on the dog's paw. But he did not move. He did not complain. If this dog could endure years of suffering without giving up, Nathan could endure a few hours of discomfort. Grace paused occasionally to give the dog water through a syringe, small amounts that he swallowed gratefully. She spoke to him in soft tones throughout the process, nonsense words, gentle reassurances, the kind of sounds a mother might make to a frightened child. Nathan watched her work and felt something shift in his chest. He had known Grace was special. He had not fully understood how special until this moment. The pivotal moment came late in the afternoon. Grace had cleared most of the ticks from the dog's body and was working on the final clusters around his face. She reached toward his muzzle, tweezers in hand, moving slowly and carefully as she had done all day. The dog's reaction was instantaneous. He flinched violently, pressing himself flat against the table. His front paws came up to cover his face, a desperate, instinctive gesture of protection. His whole body curled inward, making himself as small as possible, bracing for a blow that existed only in his memory. Grace froze. Nathan froze. The room fell silent except for the dog's rapid, panicked breathing. Grace set down her tweezers. When she spoke, her voice cracked in a way Nathan had never heard before. "He's not afraid of the pain," she said quietly. "He's afraid of hands near his face." The implication settled over them like a weight. Nathan stared at the cowering dog, this creature that had endured thousands of ticks without flinching, that had submitted to hours of treatment with patient resignation, reduced to terror by the simple motion of a hand approaching his face. Someone had taught him that. Someone had made him believe that hands meant pain, that touch meant violence, that love was just another word for hurt. Nathan's anger rose from somewhere deep in his chest. It was not hot or explosive. It was cold, controlled, and absolutely unwavering. What kind of person does this to an animal? Grace wiped her eyes with the back of her wrist. The kind of person who should never have an animal again. In that moment, Nathan made his decision. It was not a choice he had to think about or weigh carefully. It was simply there, fully formed, as certain as his own heartbeat. He would not return this dog to Victor Marsh. Not today. Not ever. Whatever it took. Whatever laws he had to navigate. Whatever battles he had to fight, this dog would never know cruelty again. By evening, the treatment was complete. The dog lay clean on fresh blankets, his fur still damp from a gentle bath that had washed away weeks of grime and neglect. Without the ticks and the matted coat, his true form emerged, a handsome German shepherd with classic markings of gold and black, elegant despite his thinness, dignified despite everything he had endured. Grace brought water in a shallow bowl, then a small portion of soft food. The dog approached both cautiously, sniffing first, then eating with a careful restraint that spoke volumes. He ate like an animal that expected his food to be taken away at any moment, savoring each bite while preparing for loss. Nathan watched, his heart aching. When the dog finished eating, Grace sat beside Nathan on the clinic floor. They were both exhausted, emotionally drained, but neither wanted to leave. "He needs a name," Grace said softly. "We can't keep calling him the dog. He deserves better than that." Nathan considered the animal before him. This creature that had survived so much. This soul that had been invisible to a world that should have protected him. Abandoned, neglected, forgotten like a ghost passing through a life that never acknowledged his existence. "Ghost," Nathan said. "His name is Ghost, because he's been invisible for too long." He paused, looking into those amber eyes that now held the faintest spark of something new. But not anymore. The dog's ears perked slightly at the sound. His tail moved just a tiny wag, barely visible, but unmistakably there. The first voluntary expression of happiness he had shown since emerging from that drainage pipe. Grace smiled through her tears. "Ghost, it's perfect." That evening, Nathan filed an official animal cruelty report with Denver Animal Protection. The officer who took his statement was sympathetic but realistic. "This will take time, sir. The owner may contest your claims until there's a formal ruling. Mr. Marsh is still the dog's legal owner." Nathan's jaw tightened. "Then we prove what he did. I have photos. I have veterinary records. I have testimony. Gather everything you can. Document everything. But I have to warn you, animal cases can be complicated. The law doesn't always work the way we think it should." Nathan thanked the officer and hung up. Grace was watching him from across the room. "This could get complicated," she said. "Victor might fight back. Let him." That night, Nathan refused to leave Ghost alone. Grace brought blankets and pillows, and they made a makeshift bed on the clinic floor beside Ghost's kennel. The dog was too weak to be moved far, and Nathan could not bear the thought of him waking up alone in an unfamiliar place. As the hours passed and the clinic fell silent, Ghost's breathing deepened into genuine sleep, perhaps the first peaceful rest he had experienced in years. Nathan lay on his side, watching through the kennel door as the dog's chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm. Tomorrow would bring challenges. Victor Marsh would learn what had happened. Legal battles would begin. The road ahead was uncertain. But tonight, Ghost was safe. Tonight, Ghost was warm and fed and clean. Tonight, Ghost was loved. Nathan closed his eyes and made a silent promise to the sleeping dog. "We're both going to be okay. I'll make sure of it." The days that followed were measured in small victories. On Sunday, the second day, Grace arrived at the clinic before dawn to check on Ghost. Nathan was already there, having barely slept, sitting on the floor beside the kennel with a cup of cold coffee in his hands. Ghost was awake, watching him with those amber eyes that seemed to hold questions he could not yet answer. Grace ran tests, checked vital signs, and declared that Ghost was stable enough to leave the clinic. "He needs rest, good food, and a calm environment," she said. "He needs to learn what a home feels like." Nathan drove Ghost to his house on Maple Ridge Lane. The dog sat in the back seat, wrapped in a clean blanket, watching the world pass by through the window with an expression of quiet bewilderment. Nathan wondered how long it had been since Ghost had ridden in a car without fear of where he was being taken. When they arrived, Nathan opened the back door and waited. Ghost did not immediately jump out. He sniffed the air, testing it for danger, then slowly stepped onto the driveway. His legs trembled, his ears swiveled, catching every sound. Nathan walked to the front door and held it open. "Come on, boy. This is your home now." Ghost hesitated at the threshold. He looked up at Nathan, then into the house, then back at Nathan again. It was as if he was asking permission not just to enter, but to hope. "It's okay," Nathan said softly. "You're safe here." Ghost stepped inside. He moved through the living room like an explorer in unknown territory, sniffing every corner, every piece of furniture, every shadow. Nathan watched without interfering, giving Ghost the space to discover his new world at his own pace. Finally, Ghost found a spot by the large bay window where afternoon sunlight pooled on the hardwood floor. He circled once, twice, 3 times, then lay down with a heavy sigh. The sunlight fell across his golden and black coat, and for a moment, he looked almost peaceful. He glanced up at Nathan, and there was a question in his eyes. Nathan nodded. "Yes, that's your spot. You can rest there whenever you want." Ghost's tail gave a single, tentative wag. Then he closed his eyes and slept. The small victories accumulated like drops of water filling an empty vessel. On day 2, Ghost ate a full meal without hesitation for the first time. He cleaned his bowl and then looked up at Nathan with an expression of mild surprise, as if he had expected the food to be taken away before he could finish. On day 3, Ghost began following Nathan from room to room. Not anxiously, not desperately, but with a quiet companionship, as if being near Nathan was simply where he belonged. When Nathan sat at his desk to work, Ghost lay at his feet. When Nathan moved to the kitchen, Ghost padded after him. When Nathan went upstairs, Ghost waited at the bottom, watching, until Nathan called him up. On day 4, Nathan bought a proper dog bed, soft, cushioned, large enough for a German Shepherd to stretch out comfortably. He placed it in the corner of his bedroom, expecting Ghost to approach it with the same caution he showed everything else. Instead, Ghost walked directly to the bed, sniffed it once, and lay down with a groan of contentment. He had never had a bed before. Nathan realized that with a pang. Ghost had spent his life on concrete floors and hard ground. The simple luxury of a soft place to sleep was a revelation. That night, Nathan woke at 3 a.m. to find Ghost's head resting on the edge of his own bed, amber eyes watching him in the darkness, not asking for anything, just watching, making sure Nathan was still there. Nathan reached out and stroked Ghost's head gently. "I'm not going anywhere," he whispered. Ghost's tail thumped softly against the dog bed, and he settled back down to sleep. On day 5, Nathan came home from work to find Ghost waiting at the door, not cowering in a corner, not hiding under furniture, waiting, tail wagging, ears perked, eyes bright with something that looked remarkably like joy. Grace visited every day, checking Ghost's healing progress, administering medications, monitoring for any signs of complications from the tick infestation. She and Nathan fell into an easy rhythm, sharing meals, sharing stories, sharing the quiet satisfaction of watching Ghost transform before their eyes. One evening, as they sat on Nathan's back porch watching Ghost explore the fenced yard, Grace leaned against Nathan's shoulder and smiled. "You know," she said, "some people adopt dogs, but I think Ghost adopted you." Nathan looked at the German Shepherd sniffing at a patch of clover, his tail swaying gently. "Maybe we adopted each other." Grace took his hand. "Maybe you did." The peace shattered on day 7. Nathan was in his home office, reviewing blueprints for a new affordable housing project. When the knock came, it was loud, aggressive, the kind of knock that announced trouble before the door even opened. Ghost's reaction was immediate. He shot to his feet, ears flat against his skull, and backed into the corner of the room. A low whine escaped his throat. Nathan's stomach tightened. He knew, even before he reached the door, who he would find on the other side. Victor Marsh stood on the porch. Nathan had only seen Victor from a distance before a figure glimpsed through a dirty car window or across an overgrown yard. Up close, Victor was both more and less than Nathan had expected. He was in his mid-40s, with the weathered look of a man who had stopped caring about appearances long ago. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair uncombed, his face unshaven. But it was his eyes that caught Nathan's attention. They held something broken. Something complicated, not just anger, but a deeper pain that Nathan could not immediately identify. "You have my dog," Victor said. His voice was rough, controlled, simmering. "I want him back." Nathan stood his ground. "He's not your dog anymore." Victor's jaw tightened. "I have papers, registration, vet records from when he was a puppy. That dog is my property." The word hit Nathan like a slap. Property. As if Ghost were a piece of furniture or a tool that had been borrowed without permission. "He's not property," Nathan said, his voice steady despite the anger building in his chest. "He's a living being you neglected and harmed. I don't know what you think you know. I know what I saw. I know what the veterinarian documented. Thousands of ticks, malnutrition, dehydration, scars that didn't come from accidents." Nathan stepped forward, filling the doorway. "I know that dog spent a week hiding in a drainage pipe because death seemed better than going back to you." Victor's face reddened. "You have no right. I have every right. I filed a report with Animal Protection. They're investigating. And until that investigation is complete, Ghost stays with me." "Ghost?" Victor laughed bitterly. You named him? He already has a name. He has a new name now, for his new life. The two men stared at each other, neither willing to back down. Victor's hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. This isn't over, Victor said finally. I'll take you to court. I'll get my dog back. And when I do, you'll regret ever interfering. Then I'll see you in court. Victor turned and walked away, his footsteps heavy on the porch stairs. Nathan watched him go, waiting until Victor's truck had pulled out of sight before closing the door. Inside, Ghost was still pressed into the corner, trembling violently. At the sound of Nathan's footsteps, he flinched. Hey, hey! Nathan knelt on the floor, keeping his movements slow and gentle. He's gone. You're okay. You're safe. It took an hour to calm Ghost down. Nathan sat on the floor beside him, speaking softly, offering gentle touches that Ghost sometimes accepted and sometimes shied away from. Eventually, the trembling stopped. Ghost's breathing slowed. He crept closer to Nathan, pressing his body against Nathan's legs, seeking comfort. Nathan wrapped his arms around the dog and held him. He will never touch you again, Nathan said. I promise you. Never again. But even as Ghost finally settled, Nathan noticed that the spark in those amber eyes had dimmed. The fear was back, that deep, learned fear that had taken days to begin fading. One visit from Victor, one sound of that voice, and Ghost remembered everything. Nathan's resolve hardened into something unbreakable. Whatever it took, whatever battles had to be fought, Ghost would never know that fear again. Eleanor Patterson appeared at Nathan's door on day 8, carrying a ceramic pot of homemade soup and a lifetime of neighborhood secrets. Nathan recognized her immediately, the elderly woman who lived 3 houses down, who waved from her garden every morning, who seemed to know everyone and everything that happened on Maple Ridge Lane. He had exchanged pleasantries with her before, but never had a real conversation. Mrs. Patterson, he said, surprised. Can I help you? It's Eleanor, dear. And no, I'm here to help you. She lifted the soup pot. This is for you and that dog of yours. Chicken and rice. Good for healing. Nathan stepped aside to let her in. Eleanor moved through his house with the ease of someone who had lived in the neighborhood long enough to feel at home anywhere on the block. She set the soup on his kitchen counter, then turned to look at Ghost, who had emerged from the living room to investigate the visitor. There you are, Eleanor said softly. She did not approach Ghost or make any sudden movements. She simply stood still and let him come to her. Ghost approached cautiously, sniffing the air. He circled Eleanor once, then sat at her feet, looking up at her with those amber eyes. Eleanor smiled. Animals know who has a good heart. This one trusts you, Nathan. That says something. She reached down slowly and stroked Ghost's head. He leaned into her touch. I came because there's something you need to hear, Eleanor said, settling into a chair at Nathan's kitchen table. Nathan sat across from her, sensing that this conversation would not be brief. I've lived on this street for 50 years, Eleanor began. I was here when that house at the end of the lane, Victor's house, was a family home. I knew Victor when he was a boy. Nathan tensed. Mrs. Patterson, Eleanor, whatever his childhood was like, it doesn't excuse what he did to Ghost. No, Eleanor agreed. It doesn't. But understanding is different from excusing. And if you're going to fight this battle, you should understand what you're fighting. She paused, her wrinkled hands folded on the table. That man wasn't born cruel, Nathan. Cruelty was taught to him. And sometimes, understanding how it was taught is the first step to making sure it doesn't get passed on. Nathan wanted to argue. He wanted to say that nothing justified what Ghost had suffered. But something in Eleanor's eyes stopped him, a wisdom born of decades of watching families rise and fall, of seeing patterns repeat across generations. Come see me when you're ready to hear the rest, Eleanor said, rising from her chair. Some stories take time to tell, but I think, eventually, you'll need to know. She stopped at the door, looking back at Nathan and Ghost. What you're doing is right. That dog deserves a champion, and I believe you're the one meant to be it. After she left, Nathan sat in silence for a long time, Ghost at his feet. Eleanor's words echoed in his mind. Cruelty was taught to him. He did not know what to do with that information yet, but he filed it away, sensing that it would matter before this was over. On day 9, Grace arrived with an idea. We should share Ghost's story, she said. Online? Publicly. Nathan's immediate reaction was resistance. He was a private person. He did not like attention. The thought of strangers on the internet dissecting his life made his skin crawl. I don't know, Grace. This isn't about you, she said gently. It's about every dog like Ghost who has no voice. It's about building support in case this goes to court. It's about making sure Victor can't just quietly take Ghost back without anyone noticing. She pulled out her phone. I already drafted something. Just look at it. The post was simple and honest. It told Ghost's story without sensationalism, the discovery in the drainage pipe, the tick infestation, the slow recovery, the ongoing legal uncertainty. Grace had included photos Ghost on that first day, covered in ticks and barely alive. Ghost during treatment, patient and resigned. Ghost now, resting in a sunbeam, his eyes beginning to hold hope. Nathan read it twice. Then he nodded. Okay? Post it. Within 48 hours, the post had been shared over 10,000 times. The response was overwhelming. Comments poured in from across the country, expressions of outrage at Ghost's condition, messages of support for Nathan and Grace, donations to Riverside Animal Clinic to help cover Ghost's medical expenses. Local news stations picked up the story. A reporter called, wanting an interview. Not everyone was supportive. Some commenters defended Victor's rights as a pet owner. You can't just take someone's dog because you don't like how they treat it. One wrote, where does it end, government deciding who deserves pets? The comments sparked heated debates about animal rights, property law, and the moral obligations of pet ownership. Nathan stayed out of the arguments. He let Grace handle the media inquiries. He focused on Ghost, but he noticed that the community was rallying. Neighbors who had never spoken to him before stopped by with treats for Ghost. A local lawyer offered pro bono assistance. A petition began circulating, calling for stronger animal protection laws in Colorado. Ghost was no longer invisible. The world was finally seeing him. On day 12, the court summons arrived. Nathan opened the envelope with steady hands, though his heart raced. Victor Marsh had filed a formal petition to reclaim his dog. A hearing was scheduled for day 21. Nathan called the lawyer who had offered help, a woman named Rebecca Torres, who specialized in animal welfare cases. She came to his house that afternoon, reviewed the documentation, and gave him an honest assessment. Animal ownership law is complicated, Rebecca said. The courts generally favor the registered owner unless there's clear evidence of criminal neglect. We have strong evidence, but Victor hasn't been convicted of anything. The investigation is ongoing. In the eyes of the law, he's innocent until proven guilty, so he could get Ghost back. It's possible. Our best argument is that returning Ghost would cause demonstrable harm, psychological trauma, risk to his health. We need to prove not just that Victor was a bad owner in the past, but that Ghost's well-being depends on staying with you. Nathan looked at Ghost, who was lying in his usual spot by the window, watching a squirrel in the yard. What do we need? Everything you have. Vet records, photos, testimony from Grace, statements from neighbors about what they saw and heard at Victor's property, documentation of Ghost's behavioral changes, how he reacted when Victor came to your door. We build a case so strong that no reasonable judge could send that dog back. Nathan nodded. Then we build it. The days that followed were consumed by preparation. Nathan gathered every piece of evidence he could find. Grace provided detailed veterinary reports and agreed to testify as an expert witness. Neighbors who had heard ghosts' desperate barking late at night came forward to share their observations. The viral social media posts became evidence of community concern. Through it all, the public debate continued. Newspaper opinion sections featured letters arguing both sides. Animal rights advocates clashed with property rights defenders. The case of Ghost, the German Shepherd, became a symbol of larger questions that society had never fully resolved. What rights do animals have? Can a pet be rescued from a legal owner? Where is the line between discipline and neglect? Nathan struggled with the uncertainty. Some nights, he lay awake wondering if he had done the right thing not morally, but legally. What if the court ruled against him? What if he had to watch Ghost be taken away, knowing he could not protect him? Grace found him on one of those sleepless nights, sitting on the back porch at 2 a.m. Ghost curled at his feet. "You're worried, Dudrun," she said, sitting beside him. Terrified, Nathan admitted. Grace took his hand. "Whatever happens, we fight. We fight until there's nothing left to fight for. And even then, we don't stop." Nathan looked at her, then at Ghost, then at the stars scattered across the Colorado sky. "Whatever it takes," he agreed. In the days before the hearing, Ghost continued to thrive. He gained weight. His coat grew thick and glossy. He learned to play tentatively at first. Then, with growing joy, chasing balls in the backyard, tugging on rope toys, rolling in the grass like a puppy discovering the world. He learned to trust. He no longer flinched when Nathan raised a hand. He no longer cowered at loud noises. He began to bark happy barks. Excited barks, sounds he had perhaps never been allowed to make before. He learned to love. Every morning, he greeted Nathan with a wagging tail and bright eyes. Every evening, he settled beside Nathan on the couch, his head resting on Nathan's lap. Every night, he slept peacefully in his bed, secure in the knowledge that morning would bring safety instead of fear. Watching this transformation, Nathan realized something that both terrified and empowered him. He could not imagine his life without this dog. Ghost had become part of him, part of his home, part of his heart, part of his reason for being. Losing him would not just be a legal defeat, it would be a wound that might never heal. The hearing was in 9 days. Nathan did not know what would happen. He did not know if justice would prevail or if the law would fail Ghost the way so many people had failed him before. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He would fight until his last breath to keep Ghost safe. On the evening of day 14, Nathan stood on Eleanor Patterson's front porch, his hand raised to knock. He had been thinking about her words for nearly a week, that mysterious promise of a story that needed telling. A truth that might change how he understood everything. Part of him did not want to know. Victor Marsh was a villain in Nathan's mind. Simple and clear. Knowing more might complicate that clarity. It might make the anger harder to hold on to. But another part of him understood that simplicity was often a lie we told ourselves to avoid the messiness of truth. And if he was going to fight for Ghost, really fight, with everything he had, he needed to understand what he was fighting against. He knocked. Eleanor answered the door with a knowing smile, as if she had been expecting him. "I wondered when you'd come," she said. Tea. Her living room was a museum of decades past. Photographs covered every surface, children who had grown into adults, weddings and graduations, faces that spanned generations. A grandfather clock ticked steadily in the corner. The air smelled of lavender and old books. Eleanor poured tea into delicate china cups and settled into an armchair that had clearly been her throne for many years. Nathan sat across from her, the cup warming his hands. "You want to know about Victor?" Eleanor said. It was not a question. "I want to understand. You said cruelty was taught to him. I need to know what that means." Eleanor nodded slowly, her eyes growing distant as she reached back through the years. Victor's father was a man named Harold Marsh. He moved into that house at the end of the lane in 1978, when Victor was just 5 years old. Harold worked at a manufacturing plant outside the city. He was big, loud, and mean, the kind of man who made the air feel heavy when he walked into a room. She paused, sipping her tea. Victor was nothing like his father. He was small for his age, quiet, sensitive. He loved animals more than anything in the world. I remember seeing him in the backyard, talking to the birds, leaving scraps of food out for stray cats. He had the gentlest heart of any child I ever knew. Nathan tried to reconcile this image with the man who had stood on his porch demanding Ghost back. He could not make the pieces fit. When Victor was 7, Harold brought home a puppy, a little brown mutt from someone at work. Victor named him Buddy. Eleanor's voice softened. That dog became Victor's whole world, his best friend, his only friend. Really. Harold didn't allow Victor to play with other children, said it would make him soft, but Buddy was allowed. Buddy was the one bright spot in that boy's life. Nathan felt a chill run down his spine. He knew, somehow, that this story would not end well. For 3 years, Victor and Buddy were inseparable. Then, when Victor was 10, something happened. I never learned exactly what. Maybe Victor talked back. Maybe he got a bad grade. Maybe he simply existed in a way that annoyed his father. But Harold decided that Victor needed to be taught a lesson. Eleanor set down her teacup. Her hands trembled slightly. Harold got rid of Buddy, drove him somewhere and left him. Or worse, I never knew for certain. All I know is that Buddy disappeared one day, and Victor never saw him again. Harold told Victor it was to toughen him up, to make him a man. The silence in the room was absolute. Nathan could hear his own heartbeat. The abuse continued for years after that. Eleanor said quietly, "Not just emotional, physical too, though Harold was careful to leave marks where they wouldn't show. Victor's mother had left when he was a baby. There was no one to protect him. No one to intervene." "What about you?" Nathan asked. "The neighbors." Eleanor's eyes glistened. "We suspected. We whispered. But we didn't act. We told ourselves it wasn't our business, that we didn't know for sure, that someone else would do something." She shook her head. "I have carried that guilt for 40 years. Nathan, I saw the signs when Victor was a boy. I should have done more. I should have been braver." Nathan processed her words, feeling the ground shift beneath his understanding. His anger at Victor did not disappear. It could not disappear, not after what Ghost had suffered. But something else entered alongside it, something more complicated than simple hatred. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. Eleanor met his eyes. "Because breaking the cycle requires more than punishment. It requires someone brave enough to choose differently. Victor became what was done to him. He learned that love could be taken away without warning, that vulnerability was dangerous, that the only way to survive was to become hard. He learned that animals were property to be controlled, not souls to be cherished." She leaned forward. "What you're doing with Ghost, the love you're giving him, the protection, the patience, that's what Victor never received. You're showing that dog what should have been shown to a little boy 60 years ago. You're proving that the cycle can be broken." Nathan sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of her words settling over him. He thought of Ghost cowering in that drainage pipe. He thought of Victor cowering in a house with a father who took away the only thing he loved. 2 creatures, decades apart, both broken by cruelty they did not deserve. "It doesn't excuse what he did," Nathan said finally. "No," Eleanor agreed. "It doesn't. But understanding might help you find peace, whatever happens next. And it might help you become the kind of person who can break cycles instead of continuing them." Nathan finished his tea and rose to leave. At the door, he turned back. "Thank you, Eleanor, for trusting me with this." She smiled sadly. "Give that dog a good life, Nathan. Give him what Victor never had. That's how we make things right, not by fixing the past, but by doing better in the present." Nathan walked home through the autumn evening, Eleanor's story echoing in his mind. Ghost met him at the door, tail wagging, eyes bright with the simple joy of reunion. Nathan knelt and wrapped his arms around the dog. "I understand now, Maul," he whispered. "And I promise the cycle ends with us." Day 21 arrived with cold clarity. Denver County Courthouse stood imposing against a gray October sky, its stone facade indifferent to the human dramas that unfolded within its walls. Nathan climbed the steps with Grace on one side and Rebecca Torres on the other. Ghost was not with them. Animals were not permitted in the courtroom, but his presence hung over everything, the silent center around which all arguments would orbit. The hearing room was smaller than Nathan had expected. A judge's bench dominated the front, flanked by flags and the seal of Colorado. Wooden benches lined the gallery. The air smelled of old paper and anxiety. Victor Marsh was already there, seated at a table with his own attorney, a thin man in an expensive suit who shuffled papers with practiced efficiency. Victor looked different than he had on Nathan's porch. He wore a clean shirt. His hair was combed. His face was shaven. But his eyes held the same broken complexity Nathan had glimpsed before. Judge Patricia Woodward entered, and everyone rose. She was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes that suggested she had seen every possible permutation of human conflict and was no longer surprised by any of it. This hearing concerns the custody of a German Shepherd dog, currently in the possession of Nathan Cole, and claimed by the registered owner, Victor Marsh. Judge Woodward announced, "I've reviewed the preliminary filings. Let's hear the arguments." Victor's attorney spoke first. His argument was straightforward and legalistic. Victor Marsh was the dog's registered owner. He had purchase records, veterinary documents from puppyhood, proof of legal ownership. There had been no criminal conviction for animal cruelty. The ongoing investigation had not produced charges. In the eyes of the law, Victor Marsh had done nothing wrong. "My client acknowledges that the dog's condition was poor when it was found," the attorney conceded. But Mr. Marsh was going through a difficult personal period. He was dealing with depression, unemployment, and the recent death of his only remaining family member. The dog's care suffered as a result. This is regrettable but not criminal. Mr. Marsh is prepared to demonstrate that he can provide proper care going forward. Nathan's jaw tightened, but Rebecca Torres placed a calming hand on his arm. Their turn would come. When it did, Rebecca presented their case with methodical precision. She introduced Grace's veterinary reports documenting Ghost's condition upon rescue: the tick infestation, the malnutrition, the dehydration, the old scars. She presented photographs that made several people in the gallery gasp. She called Grace to the stand as an expert witness. Grace spoke clearly and professionally, describing what she had observed during Ghost's treatment. She explained the defensive behavior, the cowering, the covering of his face, and what it indicated about his past experiences. She testified that returning Ghost to his previous environment would cause severe psychological harm. Rebecca called neighbors who had heard Ghost's desperate barking in the night. She presented the social media posts and the community's response. She painted a picture not just of neglect, but of a pattern of suffering that had gone on for years while a community watched and did nothing. Finally, she addressed the court directly. "Your Honor, this case is not simply about property rights. It is about whether the law protects those who cannot protect themselves. The evidence shows that this dog suffered tremendously under Mr. Marsh's care. The evidence shows that he has thrived under Mr. Cole's care. Returning him to Mr. Marsh would not be justice, it would be cruelty sanctioned by the court." Judge Woodward listened to everything without expression. When both sides had finished, she turned to Victor directly. "Mr. Marsh, I'd like to hear from you. In your own words, how did the dog come to be in the condition described?" Victor's attorney began to object, but Victor waved him off. He stood slowly, his shoulders hunched, his eyes fixed on the table in front of him. "I didn't." He stopped, swallowed. Tried again. "I didn't know it got that bad. I was going through things. My mother died last year. I lost my job. I stopped. I stopped being able to take care of much of anything, including myself." He looked up, and Nathan saw something he had not expected: genuine confusion, genuine pain. "I know I let him down. I know I failed him. But I didn't mean to. I never meant to hurt him." The room was silent. Judge Woodward studied Victor for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "Thank you, Mr. Marsh. You may sit down." She reviewed her notes, consulted something on her computer, and then delivered her ruling. "Based on the evidence presented, I find that there is sufficient cause for concern regarding the dog's welfare to warrant continued separation from Mr. Marsh pending the completion of the animal protection investigation. The dog will remain in Mr. Cole's custody until further notice. Mr. Marsh retains the right to appeal this decision once the investigation concludes." Relief flooded through Nathan so intensely that he nearly collapsed. Grace squeezed his hand. Rebecca nodded with professional satisfaction. But as Nathan watched Victor rise and leave the courtroom quickly, without looking at anyone, his shoulders hunched with defeat, he did not feel victorious. He felt the weight of Eleanor's story pressing on his heart. He thought of a 10-year-old boy whose father took away his only friend. He thought of cycles that repeated across generations unless someone was brave enough to break them. Outside the courthouse, Nathan made a decision. He spotted Victor in the parking lot, unlocking an old pickup truck with rusted wheel wells. Nathan walked toward him, ignoring Grace's questioning look. "Victor." Victor turned, his expression hardening. "What, you won? Congratulations. I didn't come here to gloat." A long pause stretched between them. Traffic hummed on the street beyond. A cold wind scattered leaves across the asphalt. "I heard about what happened to you," Nathan said quietly. "When you were a kid. About Buddy." Victor's face transformed shock first, then anger. Then something raw and vulnerable that he quickly tried to hide. "That's none of your business." "You're right. It's not." Nathan held his ground. "But I want you to know what happened to you was wrong. What your father did was wrong. And what you did to Ghost was also wrong. Both of those things can be true at the same time." Victor said nothing. His hands clenched at his sides. Nathan reached into his pocket and pulled out a card, a mental health resource center that Rebecca had mentioned. A place that offered sliding scale counseling for people who could not afford traditional therapy. "Cycles can be broken," Nathan said. "If you ever want to talk to someone, if you ever want to try to heal, there are people who can help." He held out the card. Victor stared at it but did not take it. Nathan set the card on the hood of Victor's truck and turned to walk away. He did not look back. But as he reached Grace, who was waiting at the edge of the parking lot, he heard a small sound behind him, the soft scrape of paper being picked up from metal. He did not know if Victor would ever change. He did not know if the cycle would truly be broken or if the damage was too deep, the patterns too ingrained. But he had offered a door. What Victor did with it was his own choice. Grace took Nathan's hand as they walked to her car. "What was that about?" she asked. Nathan thought about Eleanor's story. About broken children becoming broken adults. About the courage required to choose differently. "Breaking the cycle," he said. "Or trying to. Anyway." What the courtroom did not see, what Nathan carried with him through every moment of that hearing, was the memory of the night he almost lost Ghost forever. It happened on day 14, 1 week before the judge delivered her ruling. Ghost had been thriving, or so Nathan believed. The dog was eating well, gaining weight, learning to trust. Every day brought new progress, new moments of connection, new reasons to hope. Then, without warning, everything changed. Nathan came home from work to find Ghost lying in his usual spot by the window. But something was wrong. The dog did not lift his head when Nathan entered. His tail did not wag. His breathing was shallow and rapid, and when Nathan knelt beside him, he felt the heat radiating from Ghost's body like a furnace. "Hey boy, what's wrong?" Ghost's amber eyes opened slowly, but they were dull, unfocused. He tried to lift his head and failed. A soft whine escaped his throat, not the whimper of fear Nathan had heard in the drainage pipe, but something worse. The sound of a body failing. Nathan's hands trembled as he called Grace. "Something's wrong with Ghost. He's burning up. He won't move." "I'm coming. Keep him cool. Wet towels if you have them. I'll be there in 10 minutes. The drive to Riverside Animal Clinic was the longest of Nathan's life. Ghost lay across the back seat, wrapped in damp towels. his breathing growing more labored with each passing mile. Nathan drove with one hand on the wheel and one hand reaching back to touch Ghost's fur, as if physical contact alone could anchor the dog to life. At the clinic, Grace took over with the calm efficiency that made her exceptional at her work. But Nathan saw the worry in her eyes. She ran tests, checked vital signs, consulted reference materials. When she finally turned to Nathan, her expression was grave. "It's a tick-borne infection, ehrlichiosis. Sometimes it hides in the system even after the ticks are removed. The bacteria were dormant, and now they've flared up." "What does that mean?" "It means the infection has spread. His white blood cell count is dangerously low. His organs are under stress." Grace paused, and Nathan saw her fighting to maintain her professional composure. "He needs intensive care, IV antibiotics, fluids, constant monitoring. I'm going to do everything I can." "But—" Grace looked at him with eyes that held both compassion and honesty. "But you need to prepare yourself, Nathan. There's a chance he might not survive this." The words hit Nathan like a physical blow. He staggered, catching himself on the edge of the examination table. Ghost lay before him, barely conscious, fighting a battle that might already be lost. "No." The word came out hoarse, desperate. "No. He's come too far. He survived everything, the neglect, the ticks, the drainage pipe. He can't die now. Not after everything." Grace moved to his side, her hand on his arm. "I'm going to fight for him. I promise you. But I need you to understand the reality." Nathan looked at Ghost, this dog who had trusted him, who had chosen him, who had begun to believe that the world could be kind. The thought of losing him was unbearable. It was not just grief he felt, but something deeper, something that touched wounds he had carried for 5 years. "I can't lose him," Nathan whispered. "Grace, I can't." She held him while he broke down, sobs racking his body in a way they had not since he was a child. All the fear, all the uncertainty, all the weight of the past weeks poured out of him in that sterile examination room. Grace worked through the night. Nathan refused to leave, sitting vigil beside Ghost's kennel as IV lines delivered antibiotics into the dog's weakened body. The hours crawled past. Midnight came and went. Ghost's breathing remained labored, his body burning with fever. At 3 a.m, Nathan began to talk. He told ghost stories, rambling, half-coherent tales about his childhood, about his work, about the house on Maple Ridge Lane that he had rebuilt with his own hands. He talked about Grace and how she had changed his life. He talked about the future he imagined, long walks through the neighborhood, lazy Sunday mornings, years of companionship stretching ahead like a promise. Then, exhausted and emotionally raw, Nathan told Ghost the secret he had never shared with anyone. 5 years ago, he said quietly, I was driving to a job interview, the most important interview of my life, a position at the firm I'd dreamed of joining since architecture school. Everything I'd worked for came down to that one meeting. He paused, the memory sharp and painful. On the highway, I saw a dog on the side of the road. She was hurt, lying in the grass, not moving much, a German shepherd with golden and black fur, just like you. Ghost's eyes flickered, as if he was listening even through the haze of fever. I slowed down. I almost stopped. But then I looked at the clock and I thought about the interview, and I told myself someone else would stop. Someone who wasn't already running late. Someone who had time. I told myself it wasn't my responsibility. Nathan's voice cracked. I kept driving. I went to my interview. I got the job. He laughed bitterly. Everyone congratulated me. They said it was the start of my career. They didn't know that I'd left a piece of my soul on that highway. Grace had entered the room silently. She stood in the doorway, listening. A week later, I drove back to that spot. I don't know why, guilt, maybe, or hope that somehow everything had turned out okay. But there was nothing there. Just a small cross someone had put up by the road. The kind people make for animals that don't survive. Tears streamed down Nathan's face. I found out later that the dog had been pregnant. She died there on the roadside. And her puppies died with her. Someone eventually stopped, but it was too late. He looked at Ghost. I've never known for sure, but I've always wondered, what if that was your mother? What if you exist because somehow one of those puppies survived? What if you've been waiting all this time for me to make a different choice? Grace crossed the room and knelt beside him. Nathan, does it make up for it? He asked, his voice raw. If I save Ghost, does it make up for what I did? Grace took his hand. That's not for me to say. You made a choice you regret. You were young, you were scared, and you were human. But Nathan, you're making a different choice now. Ghost is alive because of you. Whatever happened 5 years ago, you're here now. You stopped this time. That matters. Nathan looked at Ghost, still fighting, still struggling, still refusing to give up. I won't drive past this time, he whispered. I won't look away. I promise. The night stretched on, endless and uncertain. Nathan stayed beside Ghost, talking to him, holding his paw, willing him to survive. Grace checked vital signs every hour, adjusting medications, doing everything medical science could offer. By 6 a.m, the first gray light of dawn crept through the clinic windows. Nathan had not slept. His eyes were raw, his body exhausted. But he refused to leave. Grace checked Ghost's temperature and went still. She checked it again. Then she looked up at Nathan with tears in her eyes. His fever broke. He's stabilizing. Nathan's breath caught. He's going to be okay. He's going to make it. Nathan. He's going to be okay. Ghost's amber eyes opened slowly, clearer than they had been in 24 hours. He looked at Nathan, really looked at him, and his tail moved. Just a small wag, weak and tired, but unmistakably there. Nathan wept with relief. Ghost lifted his head with tremendous effort and licked Nathan's hand. It was the first time he had initiated affection, the first time he had reached out instead of simply accepting. Thank you, Nathan whispered, pressing his forehead against Ghost's. Thank you for fighting. Thank you for staying. Ghost's tail wagged again, and Nathan knew that whatever happened next, whatever battles remained, they would face them together. 3 days after the court hearing, on day 18, Nathan sat on his back porch watching Ghost explore the yard. The German Shepherd moved with a confidence that would have been unimaginable just weeks earlier, sniffing at bushes, chasing fallen leaves, occasionally glancing back at Nathan as if to confirm that this life was real, that it would not be taken away. Nathan's phone buzzed with a notification. Another message through social media. Probably the viral post about Ghost had generated hundreds of comments and messages, most of them expressions of support, some requests for interviews, a few angry defenses of property rights. He had stopped reading most of them, but something made him open this one. The message was from a woman named Megan Richardson. Her profile photo showed a smiling face framed by dark hair, but the words she had written carried a weight that went far beyond casual correspondence. Mr. Cole, I saw the story about your dog Ghost. I need to tell you something. I think he saved my life. Nathan sat up straighter, his attention suddenly focused. He read on. 2 years ago, I was at the lowest point of my life. I had lost my job. My marriage had fallen apart. I was living in a small apartment in Colorado Springs, completely alone, and I had convinced myself that no one would notice or care if I disappeared. Nathan's chest tightened. He knew where this was going, and he was not sure he was ready to hear it. One night in October, I drove to the river outside town. I sat on the bank for hours, crying, trying to find a reason to keep going. I couldn't find one. I had made up my mind. Then the words blurred as Nathan's eyes grew wet. Then a dog appeared. He came out of the darkness like a ghost, thin, dirty, obviously a stray. He didn't bark at me or run away. He just walked over and sat beside me. Then he put his head in my lap and stayed there all night. Nathan looked at Ghost, who had settled in a patch of sunlight, his amber eyes half closed with contentment. I don't know how to explain what happened, but sitting there with that dog, feeling his warmth, knowing that this abandoned creature had chosen to comfort me, something shifted. I thought, if this dog can survive whatever he's been through, maybe I can survive too. When the sun came up, I drove myself to a hospital and asked for help. Megan's message continued. I've thought about that dog every day since. I always wondered what happened to him, whether he found a home, whether he survived. When I saw the photos in your post, the before pictures, when he was covered in ticks, I recognized him immediately. The markings, the eyes, the way he holds his head, Mr. Cole. I am absolutely certain that the dog who saved my life is the same dog you rescued from that drainage pipe. Nathan's hands trembled as he read the final lines. Your dog saved my life before you saved his. I just wanted you to know that whatever you're going through, to keep him safe, please don't give up. He's special. He's more special than you could possibly know. Nathan stared at the screen for a long time, unable to speak. Then he went inside and showed the message to Grace. She read it in silence, her hand pressed to her mouth. When she finished, tears were streaming down her face. Even when Ghost was suffering, she whispered, he was saving others. The revelation transformed everything Nathan thought he understood. Ghost was not just a victim who needed rescuing. He had never been just a victim. Even in his darkest moments, abandoned and starving and alone, he had possessed enough love to sit beside a stranger in pain and offer comfort. Ghost was a survivor, and he was a savior. Nathan wrote back to Megan that evening, and over the following days, they exchanged messages that deepened into genuine connection. With her permission, Nathan shared her story publicly, not for attention, but because he believed people needed to hear it. The response was overwhelming. Donations poured in, not just for Ghost's care, but for animal rescue organizations across Colorado. Local news stations ran follow-up stories. The case of Ghost, the German Shepherd, became more than a custody dispute. It became a symbol of resilience, of the unexpected ways that broken creatures could heal one another. On day 25, Megan flew to Denver. Nathan and Grace met her at the airport, a woman in her mid-30s with kind eyes and a nervous smile. They drove to Maple Ridge Lane in near silence, the anticipation building with every mile. When they arrived at the house, Nathan opened the door and called for Ghost. The German Shepherd trotted into the hallway, his tail wagging at the sight of familiar faces. Then he noticed the stranger standing behind Nathan. Ghost went still, his ears pricked forward, his nose twitched. Something ancient and powerful moved behind his amber eyes, recognition that transcended the passage of time. Then his tail began to wag, not the cautious wag Nathan had grown accustomed to, but a wild, joyful movement that seemed to involve his entire body. Ghost bounded toward Megan, nearly knocking her over in his enthusiasm. He licked her face, whining with excitement, pressing against her as if trying to merge his body with hers. Megan dropped to her knees and wrapped her arms around him, sobbing. Thank you, she whispered into his fur. Thank you for staying with me that night. Thank you for not giving up on me. Ghost's tail never stopped wagging. Nathan and Grace stood back, watching the reunion through their own tears. There was nothing to say. Words would have been inadequate for a moment like this. That evening, the three humans shared a meal together while Ghost moved between them, accepting pets and treats, basking in the love that filled the room. Megan told stories about her life since that night by the river, the therapy she had sought, the job she had rebuilt, the meaning she had found. She was not the same person who had sat in the darkness 2 years ago. She had survived, and she had grown. Before she left, Megan made a decision. I'm going to start volunteering at animal shelters, she said. I want to help other dogs like Ghost. I want to pay forward what he gave me. Nathan walked her to her rental car, Ghost padding alongside them. "Thank you for reaching out," Nathan said, "for sharing your story." Megan smiled. "Thank you for saving him, for giving him the life he deserves." She knelt one last time to embrace Ghost, whispering something into his ear that Nathan could not hear. Then she drove away, and Nathan was left standing in the autumn twilight with the dog who had changed everything. That night, Nathan sat on the back porch with Ghost beside him, the stars scattered across the Colorado sky like scattered promises. He thought about everything that had led to this moment. His own guilt from 5 years ago, Ghost's suffering at Victor's hands, Megan's darkest night by the river, Eleanor's decades of silent regret. All of these threads, woven together by chance or fate or something beyond human understanding. Ghost came to him at the exact moment Nathan needed to confront his past. Ghost saved Megan when she needed hope. Ghost's suffering led to a community awakening about the voiceless creatures who depended on human mercy. Perhaps there were no coincidences. Perhaps broken things found each other so they could become whole together. Nathan looked at Ghost healthy now, his coat gleaming, his eyes bright with trust and love. "You were never just a stray," Nathan said softly. "You were exactly where you needed to be. And so was I." Ghost's tail wagged, and he rested his head on Nathan's knee. The cycle was broken. The healing had begun. 3 months later, Ghost was unrecognizable from the skeletal creature who had crawled out of that drainage pipe. His coat gleamed golden and black in the winter sunlight. His frame had filled out with healthy muscle. His eyes, once dull with resignation, now sparkled with the quiet joy of a dog who knew he was loved. He had been certified as a therapy dog, twice a week. Nathan drove Ghost to a local center that helped people recovering from trauma. Children who had witnessed things no child should see, adults rebuilding lives after loss, veterans learning to trust the world again. Ghost moved among them with gentle patience, offering his presence without demand, allowing hands to stroke his fur and tears to fall into his coat. The staff said he had a gift and ability to sense who needed him most. Nathan heard through Eleanor that Victor Marsh had entered a mental health program. He was not in contact with Victor, did not know the details, but the news brought a quiet sense of completion. The cycle, perhaps, was finally breaking. 1 year later, Nathan and Grace stood in the backyard of the house on Maple Ridge Lane, surrounded by friends and family, exchanging vows beneath an October sky. Ghost sat beside them, a blue bow tie around his neck, the rings secured to his collar. Megan stood among the guests, wiping happy tears. Eleanor read a passage about second chances and the healing power of love. Nathan looked at Grace, then at Ghost, then at the faces gathered to celebrate this moment. He remembered the drainage pipe, the whimper, the amber eyes that feared hope itself. Some sounds break your heart, but some sounds break it open. Grace took his hand, Ghost wagged his tail. That evening, as twilight settled over the yard, Nathan and Grace sat together while Ghost lay in his favorite spot, sighing with contentment. He was never a ghost at all. He was always here, waiting to be seen. And now, finally, he was home. Ghost's journey from that dark drainage pipe to a home filled with love teaches us something profound about the nature of family and gratitude. Family is not always defined by blood or legal papers. Sometimes family is found in the most unexpected places, in the eyes of a stranger who refuses to look away, in the hands that choose healing over harm, in the hearts brave enough to fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. Nathan, Grace, and Ghost became a family not through birth or obligation, but through choice, through showing up when it mattered most. Gratitude, too, flows in unexpected directions. Nathan believed he was saving Ghost, but Ghost had already saved Megan. And in saving Ghost, Nathan finally forgave himself for a choice made 5 years earlier on a lonely highway. We heal others, and in doing so, we heal ourselves. The lesson is simple but eternal. Every act of kindness ripples outward. Every creature deserves someone who fights for them. And it is never too late to become the person you were meant to be. Now we ask you, have you ever witnessed an animal or a person suffering while others looked away? What did you do, and what do you wish you had done differently?